Welcome to the orientation for potential applicants to the competition for preparation of special education, early intervention, and related services leadership personnel funded by the Office of Special Education Programs and the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services at the U.S. Department of Education. I'm Celia Rosenquist, a project officer at OSEP and the competition manager for this competition. The assistance listing number, previously called the Catalog of Federal Domestic Assistance Number, or CFDA, is 84.325D. Next slide. I would like to go over some caveats before we begin this webinar. First, the intent of this presentation is to provide guidance only, and the information contained in the webinar provides a general summary of the information contained in the notice inviting applications and the application package. Therefore, it's important that all prospective applicants read the entire notice, application package, and any additional relevant information. In addition, applicants are encouraged to listen to the more general webinar entitled Applying for Office of Special Education Programs Discretionary Grants, for an orientation to the overall process. That webinar can be found on osepideals.work.org, the same location that houses the link to this recording. Next slide. Please be aware of application timelines. The notice was published in the Federal Register on January 31st, 2022. All applications are due on April 1st, 2022 by 11:59 p.m. and 59 seconds. Note that this is Eastern Time, and applicants should determine what the time would be in your time zone accordingly. We will discuss the implications of a late submission later in the webinar. Next slide. The application package available in grants.gov contains the most comprehensive information on how to apply. In it, you will find a Dear Applicant letter from Larry Wexler, Director of OSEP's Research to Practice Division. You will also find the notice inviting applications that has important information about the grants.gov system submission procedures. The package also contains the detailed selection criteria that will be used to judge the quality of the applications, as well as general information in all required forms. Please read the application package carefully. Next slide. In this next section, I'll go over the purpose of the Personnel Development Program and 325D priority, eligible applicants, number of anticipated awards, funding levels, and project period. Next slide. The purpose of the Personnel Development to Improve Services and Results for Children with Disabilities program are to, 1, help address state-identified needs for personnel preparation in special education, early intervention, related services, and regular education to work with children, including infants and toddlers with disabilities, and 2, ensure that those personnel have the necessary skills and knowledge derived from practices that have been determined through scientifically based research and experience to be successful in serving those children. Next slide. The purpose of this priority, the 325D priority, is to support existing doctoral degree programs that prepare special education, early intervention, and related services personnel who are well qualified for and can act effectively in leadership positions as researchers and special education, early intervention, related services personnel preparers in institutes of higher ed, or as leaders in state education agencies, lead agencies, local education agencies, early intervention service programs, or schools. Next slide. Applicants must address the absolute priority, which is the preparation of leadership personnel. Please note that there is also one competitive preference priority. This competitive preference priority is an applicant that has not had an active grant in the last 5 years. Please note as well that applicant refers to the IHE and not individual faculty. So if your IHE has had a 325D grant that has been active in the last 5 years, you would not be eligible for the competitive preference priority. The doctoral program must culminate in a doctoral degree. Partnerships comprised of 2 or 3 IHEs are eligible to apply for funding. Applicants proposing a partnership would submit 1 application for the partnership. Please note that we have allowed partnership applications to be submitted for the past 2 years, and the primary difference is that competitive preference points are no longer awarded for those submitting a partnership application. Please also refer to the notice of how partnerships are defined if you intend to submit a partnership application. Note as well, clinical doctoral degrees and related services are eligible to apply for funding under 84325K. And the preparation of school principals is not included under this priority. Next slide. Eligible applicants are IHEs and private nonprofit organizations. We anticipate up to 25 awards for individual IHEs. Please note that the total number of awards may change depending on the number of partnership application awards. There are budget limits. For a single budget period of 12 months, awards cannot exceed, for an individual IHE, $250,000, for a 2 IHE group application, $500,000, and for a 3 IHE partnership application, $750,000. Projects can propose a project period up to 60 months. Next slide. In this section, I will go over application information, including application narrative and selection criteria, project assurances, and project requirements. Once again, this webinar provides a general summary of the information contained in the notice inviting applications and the application package. Please make sure you read the entire notice, application package, and any additional relevant information if you intend on applying. Next slide. The notice lays out sections of the application narrative and the selection criteria. These sections are significance, quality of project services, quality of the project evaluation, quality of the management plan, and adequacy of resources. And I'll go over each of them and point out in general terms what the narrative should address in each section. Once again, please read the notice carefully since the information contained in the notice is significantly more detailed. Next slide. For significance, applicants need to address the significance of the proposed project, which include data demonstrating need, data demonstrating success of the program, the expected scholar competencies, and the conceptual framework of the program. Next slide. For quality of project services, applicants must address how high-quality scholars will be recruited and retained, including those from traditionally underrepresented groups. Components of the project are designed to promote the competencies needed by leadership personnel. For partnership projects, describe how the components of the project are designed to ensure that scholars have opportunities to work with faculty and scholars at each IHE participating in the partnership that will promote the competencies identified. Also, how the components of the project prepare scholars to improve child outcomes in different settings. Next slide. Also, under quality of project services, applicants must address how partnerships with diverse stakeholders, including individuals with disabilities and their families, and individuals from racially and ethnically diverse backgrounds and their families, will inform and support project components. Applicants should also address the use of resources, available through TA centers, how scholars will be mentored, how the components of the project will promote scholar skills related to communication, networking, and collaboration, and how the project services promote scholar knowledge of strategies and approaches in attracting, preparing, and retaining future educators. Next slide. For project evaluation, applicants must address how the project will evaluate whether the stated goals and objectives of the project have been met, including both project and scholar outcomes. Describe the evaluation methodologies that will be employed, how data will be used on an ongoing basis, and ensure the evaluation results are reported in annual and final reports. Next slide. You will see that in the selection criteria that applicants should address as part of the narrative or other component of the application, such as the budget justification, the qualifications of key personnel, the management plan, time commitments of key personnel, and the adequacy of resources and the proposed budget. Next slide. As part of the process of making funding recommendations, external reviewers will judge the quality of the application using selection criteria for each section of the narrative. Each application can receive up to a total of 100 points, with significance receiving up to 10 points, quality of project services up to 45 points, project evaluation up to 25 points, and quality of management plan and adequacy of resources up to 20 points. The application package contains information on the sub-criteria within each section criteria, and applicants are strongly encouraged to read those carefully when preparing the application narrative. And once again, for those applying for the competitive preference point, those not having received a grant in the past 5 years, an additional 3 points can be received. Next slide. In addition to the narrative sections an applicant must address, there are not that the applicant has to address as part of their application narrative. There are a number of project assurances applicants are also required to meet. These include scholars must be recruited and enrolled within the first 12 months, or applicants must provide documentation scholars can still complete the program if they are enrolled after the first 12 months, that scholars can complete still by the end of the project period. Applicants should also address recruitment efforts that will target a diverse range of scholars. Applicants should provide assurances that scholars must be informed of service obligation requirements and sign pre-scholarship agreements and exit agreements. That the disbursement of scholarships in the cost of attendance to the doctoral program will be provided. And provide assurances that they're meeting the statutory requirements of 662E through H of IDEA. Next slide. Project assurances related to the budget include a minimum of 65% of the total budget must go towards scholar support. Ensure that a revised project budget will be submitted should the project not be able to recruit and enroll the proposed number of scholars, as well as budgeting for the attendance at the project directors meeting. Next slide. Other assurances including project syllabi in Appendix B. Applicants must indicate that they will participate in the OSEP supported cross-project opportunities. Applicants should ensure that any website that's created is accessible. And grantees must post progress on the project on a project website or a university website. Scholar accomplishments must be reported in the annual and final reports. And finally, submitting annual data as required on scholars for the purposes of scholar service obligation and program reporting requirements. Next slide. Lastly, all OSEP-funded projects must indicate that they will make positive efforts to employ and advance in employment qualified individuals with disabilities, that the project will involve individuals with disabilities or parents in planning, implementing, and evaluating the project, and the steps the project will take to ensure equitable access and participation in its services by program beneficiaries with special needs. Next slide. In this next section, we will cover some general information related to submitting an application. Once again, please refer to the notice for additional information. Next slide. Please note that applications must be submitted electronically in the grants.gov system. If there are reasons why an applicant cannot submit using grants.gov, the applicant must follow the information provided in the application package. Applications cannot be submitted by email, and applications must be submitted prior to the deadline of 11:59 and 59 seconds on April 1st, 2022, Eastern Standard Time. We strongly recommend applicants to submit all narratives and attachments in PDF, read-only, non-modifiable format. Next slide. In order to make sure the application is submitted on time and correctly, please register as early as possible in grants.gov and start the application process. Do not wait until you have the application ready in order to register. Grants.gov will create a workspace for applicants to submit the pieces of the application over time. And if you're already registered in the system for award management, make sure your registration is current. Recommend submitting early, a day or more in advance if possible. Should there be any problems with the grants.gov system, submitting early will allow you time to correct the problem and resubmit before the deadline. Applicants should verify that the submissions are okay. Grants.gov will send applicants notification that the submission was on time and validated. So applicants should make sure that they receive the confirmation and just not to assume that the submission was okay. Next slide. Here are some additional tips for submitting an application. Pay attention to the maximum funding levels for the grant as contained in the notice. Awards will not be made for amounts higher than the published amounts. Follow the recommended organization, page limit spacing, and font sizes to facilitate the application review process. And applicants should strongly consider following the recommendations related to page limits and line spacing. PDF files make it easier for the system to put different files together, and reviewers can more easily read and follow the information. The grants.gov submission procedures and tips for applicants found in section B of the application package can be extremely helpful for submitting the application in grants.gov. Next slide. Ineligible applications. There are 3 reasons why an application may not be eligible. First, if an application is submitted more than once and validated more than once, the last application submitted will be considered, and previous applications will be considered duplicates and therefore ineligible. Second, all applications received after the published deadline will not be eligible for funding. So once again, the deadline is April 1st, 2022 at 11:59 and 59 seconds PM Eastern Standard Time. Third, applications that do not address the priority will also not be eligible for funding. For example, an application proposing to build a school or establish an after-school program or provide tutoring services for children with disabilities will not be eligible since they do not address the purpose of this priority. Next slide. As I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, this webinar covered the highlights of what's contained in the application package and priority. And if you're submitting an application, please once again make sure you read the entire notice, the application package, and any additional relevant information. If you have additional questions, please contact me by email at celia.rosenquist@ed.gov, which is the preferred approach, or you can contact me by phone, which is 202-245-7373. Thank you.